In today's episode, we have Will Armstrong, who is the teetotal specialist. He is an addiction coach and helps men overcome cocaine addictions, alcohol addictions, pornography addictions, every vice pretty much under the sun. We're going to go through all of these masculinity habits and the exact strategies you need to try and improve your life. Now we get to the episode. So Will, what do you think is the definition of addiction?
It's a powerful first question. So I actually don't like the word addiction. I don't use the word addict, sobriety, recovery, none of these labels, because to take you back to when I went through it myself, was that I had what most people would call addiction. You know, I would spend evenings by myself in my bedroom in London, racking up lines and just almost having this voice at the back of my head saying, this isn't right, you shouldn't be doing this. And yet I couldn't stop. Now, for most people, that is addiction. Being 7 years out of it now, I realized what I had was a very, very well-trained habit. And I was in this habit loop where every time I was triggered to remember the reward, the response was intense craving. I want to go and have that. And there was no resistance and especially no accountability to stop me doing that. Now, when I finally got to the point where I thought, right, I need to stop this. I need help. I need some sort of professional help. I tried things like 12 steps. I tried things like AA. I looked into rehabs. And all of it promoted this sense of, this is your identity. You are an addict, you're an alcoholic. And I realize, again, being so far out of it now, that the identity is such a crucial part of how you get out of this. How can anyone break free from it naturally feeling like this is the substance I want if you call yourself an addict, or you say, I suffer with addiction, or I have an addictive personality? These things stop ourselves from evolving into a new identity. And I believe that every human has an infinite capacity for change. And yet most people at the first hurdle limit themselves by saying, I'm an addict or I suffer with addiction.
And that's essentially by just labeling themselves.
Yeah, which, you know, I went to an AA meeting and I said, it kind of got to my turn and I said, okay, my name is Will. And my friend elbowed me and was like, you've got to say you're an alcoholic. And I was like, I don't want to say I'm an alcoholic. And as well, you know, the same for most people out there. Alcohol never seems like the problem. It seemed like Coke was the problem. But you don't call yourself a Cokeaholic. I used to smoke like crazy. I wasn't a smokeaholic. And yet I had to call myself an alcoholic. And I did it and it felt so unnatural. And I was like, I don't want to take on this label forever, because then forever I will be linked back to this habit. But it's not the habit that's the problem. The habit is my attempt at a solution. But we never actually confront what the problem is. And most people don't actually know what the problem is.
If we take you as kind of a case study, if that's okay, do you think it's a slippery slope when people start in recreational drugs, alcohol, escorts, pornography, like name your vice?
Yes, but not for everybody. Everyone has a different capability to what position they'll end up in. The biggest thing I hear from people who are way down the line is the same thing, which is, I never thought this would happen to me. I'm very headstrong. I've got strong willpower. This would never happen to me. And yet it has. And that's because it is a slope in terms of all of these behaviors like porn, drinking, coke, prostitution, gambling, even work, shopping. They're all dopamine seeking behaviors. Now, some have more of a positive output, like let's say work, for instance. And the thing is, every time you use these, let's say alcohol and drugs, your body adapts. Your body's incredible at adapting. So when it adapts to it, it needs more of it to feel the same effects. So, you know, I don't know what your relationship with alcohol is like at the minute, but I imagine you drink fairly infrequently. You look like you drink fairly infrequently.
The last time I drank was December 2023. I had one glass of wine.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But if you were to have that one glass of wine when you were 13 years old, it probably would have affected you a lot more. I remember the first time I drank a beer and I had like just one bottle of beer and I was out of it at like 13 years old. But skip forward a few years and I can drink 2 bottles of tequila and I was like, I was still all right. And I realized my body was so good at adapting to all of these pressures upon them. So over time, people get worse. I've never seen anyone who has got to a point where they realize they struggle with these things and it naturally get better. It only ever gets worse. So what my job and my team's job is, we catch people once they have the awareness before they've hit the external rock bottom. And still then, it's very difficult for people to accept that there is another way around it apart from total abstinence, which is where teetotal comes from.
Do you think that is the only solution for people when they are in, I'm not use the word addiction, but in that cycle where they can't stop almost, is they have to, rather than the kind of like reining it in, they just cut it out completely?
Yeah, I mean, reining it in is usually our first port of call. Let's try and rein it in. And I guess it depends what we mean by solution, because no matter how much you drink, no matter what your relationship is like with these substances, they do not, as a fact, not an opinion, they do not bring any positives. Even though we can create positives like it's fun, or it makes me more relaxed, or it's a social lubricant. All of these things are negatives that are masked with this positive front. And if for me, it's not, I'm not against the substances. The substances are what they are. It's the same way like I'm not against petrol, but if people started drinking petrol, it's a problem. So you're like, okay, I'm not against the substances, but we have to be honest with ourselves that they do not bring any positives, but they bring us temporary relief. And the question is, what is that relief from?
And what do you see that normally tend to be? Because I think probably the biggest thing I see in particular, I specifically work with a lot of people in the fitness industry, a lot of people driven, and myself I would include myself in that bracket more so when I was younger. And I think people who are also very driven like that, driven by a lot of insecurity. Do you think that's one of the things that sometimes like people end up drinking or doing drugs because they feel maybe even more so socially awkward?
That was literally why I did it. So when I was younger, when I was 15, I developed social anxiety. I couldn't be around people. I couldn't talk in front of people. And alcohol was an easy way to just quiet down those voices and feel comfortable in those situations. And then when I got to London, when I was 21 years old, a friend of mine gave me a DVD case with a couple of white lines on it. And I was like, I was so anti-drugs. I'm like, that's not me. But I remember doing it, and suddenly even though alcohol helped, but it made you a bit hazy and not really on the ball, Coke suddenly made me super sharp and really eloquent, and just like really what I perceived as really fun and energized. And everyone liked to be around me because I was good energy. And what that did, the same way if you have support in certain ways, is it removes your ability to work on those things yourself. For instance, if I was to go in, I was just in the UK, if I went into a pub, non-alcoholic beer, if all the alcohol in the building got removed, I would be exactly the same. But everyone else in there would feel incredibly awkward. And it made me realize that they don't have practice in how to socialize or be confident without substances. But I do. And it takes time to build that. The reason why most people feel like not drinking is boring is because without alcohol, they are boring, because they've never learned how to be interesting without it. Because it's like anything else, like training in a gym, it takes reps and time, and not every session is going to feel great. But it's that same process of counter conditioning the habit that you have strengthened. I say to people when they jump on a call and they're struggling, I say, look, imagine if you had played football the amount of times that you did Coke. How good would you be at football? And they're like, I'd be pro. I'm like, exactly. You're pro at taking Coke, right? What we've got to do is counter condition that habit, because right now, if we do nothing, your brain is like, it just knows how to do Coke. It knows how to be triggered. It knows where to get it. It knows everything like that. So what we need to do is put in the work to go the opposite way. Now, you might have drank and done Coke for 20 years, but luckily, imagine if it took 20 years to get back out of it. That would suck. But it takes less than a year. What an incredible deal that is. But most people think it might take 5 weeks. And that's why you're like, listen, if anyone tells you can successfully break free from alcohol or drugs in less than 6 months, they either don't know what they're talking about, or they're lying to you to try and get you onto their program. Pretty much.
Quick introduction to the podcast. I want to make this specifically for you to help you achieve everything you want in life. So I have one small ask. Let me know what you actually want. If there's anything you want to see specifically on the podcast, drop it in the comments. If there's anything you specifically want to learn about in the podcast, drop it in the comments or message me on Instagram. Now back to the podcast. That just reminded me of a very funny yet slightly awkward scenario in a story when I was younger. I think I was 17 years old, and from the social anxiety thing, I remember I got kind of set up on a date with this girl to then go out with her and like 8 of her friends, and I was staying at her friend's house, and I was the only guy. And like, picture this, like I'm kind of like not socially awkward, but like nervous. I actually don't know these people really at all. Start drinking before going out. I just wake up the next day and like don't remember anything. Woke up on the sofa, and apparently I got paralytically drunk. I was sick absolutely everywhere. They were like calling my mum up, who's just like, just leave him in the gut and just leave him. And I think that's probably a good example where like people don't have the confidence necessarily, and they try and rely on these other things, and then they go way too far with it, which I did frequently from probably 17 to 23.
Yeah, it's the same for so many people, especially us Brits, right? Because that's the culture we grow up. We see our parents drinking when the weather's bad, which is often we all meet in the public house, which is the pub. That's where we drink and connect. So we're so used to making connections over drinking. So then if you say I'm not drinking, like there's places in the world where you say I'm not drinking and everyone's like, oh, I'm good for you. But if you say you're not drinking in the UK, it's like there's something wrong with you, and everyone's like, what's going on? Is like, have you got a problem? Are you sick? And I found that really fascinating. The reason why I'm even doing this is because when I stopped, the whole journey was fascinating to me. And obviously, I'm very much all or nothing with a lot of things that I do. And I was the same with drugs, same with drink. And I went all or nothing with finding out, why is everyone behaving like this? How can I possibly really want something, but my behavior is the complete opposite? How can so many people message me on a Sunday evening saying, I'm so done with this, I will never ever do this again, I'm done with it. But by Wednesday afternoon, they're going, maybe I could have one. Maybe one would be all right. Maybe, do you know what? Life's for living. This is what I work for. I deserve it. There's all of these narratives which are so socially conditioned, especially in the UK, and people just go along with them. For instance, one of them is, I've worked hard, I deserve a drink, right? And you think, okay, well, if we've worked hard, it means we deserve something positive. So surely that thing we're having must have a positive influence on our lives. But you say, well, wait a minute, it's so bad for our physical health, our mental health, it destroys our sleep, causes 7 different types of cancer. All of these negatives come from it. That surely would be a punishment, not a reward. But in the UK, it's a reward. For me, a reward now would be, I'll go to the gym, I'll eat a nutritious meal, I'll get an early night, I'll go to the spa, I'll get a massage, I'll spend time with a partner, I'll spend time with friends. Those are the rewards. So surely it should be, if you have a bad week at work and you haven't worked hard, go drinking to punish yourself. And it's a really strange thing to think about, but it really does make so much logical sense in my head. I don't know if it comes across that way.
100%. I think the biggest downfall of human beings, and this is also why, in my opinion, AI and ChatGPT cannot solve all problems, because people need to be held accountable, because we have the ability of like self-justification, as we can justify anything to ourselves. So like, oh, well, like for example, in a fitness context, I would be really bad at doing this to myself. If I was like dieting myself for a bodybuilding show, when I used to do that, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm way leaner, so I've trained really, really hard. I can eat an extra X, Y, Z, and then the extra 1 turns into 2 and turns into 3, and it doesn't happen just one day. It's like 5 days in a row. We always want to kind of justify things to ourselves. I think ultimately people want to try and tell themselves a lie so they can get that quick kind of dopamine they're looking for.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the common things that I find, and not just in this niche, but also in so many aspects of human psychology, is as soon as it gets to the point where it's an uncomfortable choice or an uncomfortable feeling, we then justify it by looking at someone worse. And what I found in programs like 12 Steps is people who, outside of the meeting, say, I've got a problem, this is a problem. They'll go to a meeting and they'll hear someone talk who's like far worse and go, I feel a bit guilty for being here. Like, I'm not that bad. Maybe I should come back when I'm that bad. And so they leave and go, I don't have a problem, because your frame of reference is now that. So we go, well, wait a minute. What if the frame of reference is nothing to do with anybody else, but we look at the best version of you? What if the best version of you is what we compare to? Everything right now is a problem, because you have such an incredible capacity to be a better person, a better partner, a better father, a better son, whatever it is. You have that capacity. So forget what that guy's doing in that meeting. You are nowhere near where you want to be. And of course, there's then the conflicting theory of, do we always focus on what we want? Can we not be happy with where we are? The reality why they're on a call with me is because you're not happy with where you are. So let's put in the work and let's get out of this. Forget what they're doing. And I think that's a really important thing, that people say, well, at least I'm not doing it every day. At least it's not crack. At least it's not heroin. At least I've still got my job. At least I've still got my partner. And you're like, okay, is that the standard we want? We want to be just, at least it's not total destruction.
At least is a very interesting phrase, because I think
it's a cop-out.
And I get this a lot with people with their business, even when they're looking at people. It's like, oh, I'm doing okay. It was like, dude, like, you've probably just explained of why you're not happy and why you're not doing okay. But then people will try and self-justify why it's not that bad. It's like, well, dude, like you can't actually do the things you said you want to do in X, Y, Z with that. And I think that's also where I think that the biggest thing for everyone is like two things. One is like law of exposure. Like once you've been exposed to something, you can't be unexposed.
Yeah.
Number two is the environment. And I think a great example we talk about the addiction is during the Vietnam War, the stats and the amount of American soldiers who became heroin addicts, they went back to the United States, they were no longer heroin addicts. Why? Because they had no access to heroin and no one else around them was doing it.
Yeah. It's the same when, and this is another at least kind of situation where someone will say, but it's not every situation. Like I used to live in London when I was with my friends, you're in the pub and we have a couple of drinks, someone says, should we get a bag? Usually it was me saying that. You're like, yeah, go on, let's do it. And we do that. But then the following weekend, I'll go visit my parents up in the Midlands. We'll drink, we'll have like a bottle of red wine, zero cravings, absolutely zero cravings. So then you go, well, I can't have like a problem because it's not, someone with a problem must have it every time. And what was interesting for me was I would happily sit in my room and do coke alone. But if I was to have a drink by myself, that would register as a problem. Doing coke alone, not a problem. Drinking by yourself, that's when you're like, oh, only alcoholics drink by themselves. But everyone does a bit of coke by themselves at home after a night out. And these limits we have of like, well, that's when it becomes a problem. This is when it becomes a problem is so bizarre. And what I found when I stopped, there were so many people around me that said, you can't stop yet, you're too young. And I said, well, what age can I stop? And they were like, just older. And I'm like, I need tangible. I need to know, like, when is it okay? And what I realize now is it is a problem when you decide it's a problem. That's it. Doesn't matter the amount you drink. My mum stopped drinking when she was in her 60s because she had 2 glasses of wine on a Friday night and she wasn't happy. I've got friends that drink bottles of tequila and they're fine about it. So it's not my position to say what's a problem with anyone. Obviously, you can see when it's becoming problematic to their lives, but it's as soon as they decide this is a problem because it's stopping me being who I want to be, then there's a problem.
What was the point for you where you decided this was something you needed to deal with?
Good question. So I knew something wasn't right for maybe close to a year running up to this date. And I was running a private members club in London, and every night we go in, you've got A-list celebrities, you've got some of the wealthiest people in the world, and we'd all be in a bar together, we'd all be getting drunk together. It was very hard to see what a problem looks like because most people think, oh, if you've got a problem, then you've lost your job. And I was living in the top social circles in the world with all of these incredibly famous and wealthy people, and we're all getting drunk together. And you're like, how's that a problem? And I would circulate around the bar to see everyone, and like one by one stop, and they say, do you want a drink? And I'm like, give me a shot of tequila. And I'd go around the bar once and I'd be like 14 shots of tequila, which is 1 bottle. And I'd have that at 5 p.m. before we started work. We'd run the bar till 8 a.m. And after, I'd do that for one night. Everyone messages me like, that was a crazy night. I can't believe I'm going to take a week before I come back. But I've got to go in that next night, do the same thing with a whole new group of people, even harder, again and again and again and again. And it just started to get to the point where I'm getting the tube into work. And I'm just, the anxiety is like insane. I'm constantly worried that everyone's watching me. Can they tell that I'm sweating? Do they know that I haven't slept? Do I smell of alcohol? Like so many, like I had no capacity to think of anything else in life. Nothing. It was just constantly the fear of, are people going to find out? Are people judging me? Increase the social anxiety. And then there was one night where I'd planned a couple of days off. We have a place up in the Lake District in the UK, which I don't know if you've been, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice.
So nice. I love hiking. I love getting out into the mountains. And I said to a couple of friends, why don't we take a weekend off? Like, I feel like I need a weekend out of this. And I was so excited for that. I thought I'd have a shot of tequila and another one and another one. And next thing I know, I'm in this flat on Oxford Street, and there's a table in front of me with a lot of Coke on it, like a mountain of Coke, and 2 guys opposite me who I recognized from the bar, but I never really liked them. I always saw them being like, I don't really want to hang out with those. Those guys love it. And I'm sat there being like, I am one of these guys. And I looked at my watch and it was like midday, and my train up to the lakes was at 2. And I was like, I need to get home. I need to shower. I need to go. And yeah, it was horrendous. I went to the train station, saw my friends, who one of which was very, very straight with me. And he said, you need to sort your life out. And I needed to hear that. I hated it, but I needed to hear it. And then after that weekend was when the cogs started to turn. And I'm like, yeah, there's got to be more to life than this.
Did you stay sober for that weekend?
No, but we didn't go crazy. It was like countryside, a couple beers in the pub. I was still smoking a lot. We didn't do any drugs. And then I got back to London and I was like, I'm going to do a week. I didn't want to stop. Like I'm now 7. I didn't want to stop for 7 years. That's terrifying. But I was like, let me do a week and see how I feel after that. And funnily enough, day 2, I felt fine again. And I'm like, I could probably have a couple. So I said to one of my colleagues, like, let's go to the pub. And he said, listen, you told me you're not going to drink. I'm not going with you. That guy held me accountable. I don't even speak to that guy anymore, but he doesn't realize what an impact he had on my life. But he was like, I'm not going with you. You said you're not drinking. I'm not doing that. And I was pissed off and I went home and I was like, fine. And once I got home, I was really grateful. I was like, the craving was gone. I was like, it's actually quite nice. I'm at home. Like I can have dinner. I can watch TV. I can relax. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to see the week through. I'm going to go the whole week. And what normally happens is, alcohol is a depressant. It really suppresses any emotions that you need to process. So, what do we do in the UK? There's congratulations, let's have a beer. Or you broke up with your partner. Come on, let's just go have a beer. Anything where emotions come up that you need to process them, alcohol just stops that process. So you're just kind of constantly patting down all these emotions till it's like rock solid inside of you. You remove these substances and they will naturally make their way back to the surface. I've seen it with everyone from people on our program to celebrities. There is that emotional release, and it happens several times in that first year. Happened to me in the most awkward places where, I could just be sat here with you and I just burst out crying. In my head, I'm like, I'm not a crier. I don't even know how to cry. And yet when I stop drinking and you put on a sad movie, I'm straight there now. Like you become so much more sensitive to how the body's meant to work. And I can't remember the original question. I went on a tangent there.
Basically how you came to your end in terms of from the addiction cycle. But I think with that, a lot of people probably don't realize the path they're on. What should someone look for if they're listening or watching this to realize maybe if they're going down a destructive path or maybe a path they don't want to be going down?
I always say, if you're asking yourself whether or not it's a problem, probably is, right? I've never questioned whether I have a problem with how many carrots I eat. It just doesn't come into your head. If you got to a point where you're questioning it, it's obviously problematic because that's the first thought that comes up. Like, is this an issue? And I think the best way then is to be like, forget all limits. What would the best lifestyle look like? How do you want to feel when you wake up in the morning? How do you want to act? What do you want your day to look like? The quality of anyone's life is directly linked to the quality of your emotions. What emotions do you want to feel each day? And most likely, if you visualize that person, you are currently not that person. And for me, for so many years, there was one time I went for a couple of drinks with a friend. Yeah, this was wild. We went for a couple of drinks with a friend because we were hungover. We went to a bar in London and this was like 10 p.m. We had a few drinks and we went, actually, we feel all right now. So then we went to another bar going, yeah, let's have a few more. That led to like 3 a.m. We were like, let's get something. I think we got some MD. Took some MDMA. Suddenly we're at a club till 8 in the morning. We went, let's go to another one. Then we're at a club till 10 a.m. And then we found one that was open till 3 p.m. And we were just going round and round. And next thing I knew, it was about 48 to 72 hours later. And I was in a hotel room in Paris from London. 3 days later, I've not eaten. I don't really know what's happened. But I'm on the floor of a Parisian hotel in the dark. Everyone's gone. I can't move my mouth because I've been chewing the inside of my mouth from all the drugs that it was just so painful. I couldn't talk. And I'm just laid on the floor just crying in a hotel room. And I had no idea what happened. And that's because I just went for a couple of drinks. Now, not everybody is going to be like that. Of course, there's a percentage of the population which, according to Jordan Peterson, about 10% of the population treat alcohol as a stimulant rather than a depressant. Now, I know I'm one of them because after a couple of drinks, I couldn't just mellow and chill. I would be hyped up and I'm like...
Exactly the same.
Yeah, I'm like, let's do something. And what I found with all of those people, everyone in our program that we work with, it became really, really clear that everyone was a hyper achiever. I always get people to find out their saboteur when they start, like which part of me is holding me back. Is it the avoider? Is it a victim mentality? And hyperachiever is top for almost everybody. And I realized that a lot of people might use alcohol. I say might. A lot of people do use alcohol and drugs to switch off their brain because their brain is non-stop. And that usually comes linked with ADHD. Most people that reach out say, just so you know, I have ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's pretty obvious. It's us trying to like I said at the beginning, it's trying to find a solution to the problem. And the problem is the incessant nature of my thinking.
Do you think people with that type of mindset then, like hyperachievers, overachievers, however you want to frame it, people who are getting pulled down the wrong path, wait for that to get past. People get pulled down the wrong paths. Do you think things like journaling are a thing that's actually is helpful for them to try and actually force themselves to slow down and like actually think consciously their thoughts and actions every day?
Yes. So we have 4 main pillars that help people. Number 1 is you need community. Everyone who wants to try and do it alone doesn't work. Second, which I know you'll agree with this, accountability. Accountability is crucial. Anyone who tries to do it without any accountability eventually will go back to it. The third is insight. And that's an interesting one because it's different from information. Insight is that just deep internal shift in your beliefs. And it comes from constant conversations with people who have been through it, who have gone out of it, who are still in it. At the very beginning, I used to speak to people who helped me that were like 11 years out and 17 years out. And I could sit with them for 2 hours talking. And from that conversation, I'll remember one line. Just one line, something they say, it sticks with me, shifts my entire perspective, the beliefs about what it is, and it turns it from being this big scary thing into actually a really enjoyable, easy process. But the final pillar is self-care. Now that self-care is different for a lot of people, but we go through the process of, we look at exercise, we look at journaling, we look at cold water therapy, we look at saunas as well and things like that. But probably above that, the number 1 is meditation. Now, when I stopped drinking, if someone said the word meditation to me, I would ridicule them and say, I'm not a monk. I'm not a hip. Like, that's not me. I'm strong-minded. I don't need that stuff. And about 4 weeks after stopping drinking, I was the most stressed I'd ever been, the most angry I'd ever been. I'm not an angry person, but I was waking up and I just wanted to punch something. I was storming out the house. I could feel like, I was like, what's going on? And I realized that alcohol was my off switch to the otherwise incessant busy mind that I had. And I was like, alcohol's my pressure release. It's my pressure valve on my life. So you take away that, the pressure's building and I've got nothing else to release it. And a lot of people think, especially a lot of guys are like, well, I'll just go to the gym. And it's a very important part of a good life and a healthy mind, as you know. But when it comes to habits, it will not counter condition this habit. We need to find ways. And, we say it's not a drinking problem, it's a thinking problem. But it's not just the thoughts you're thinking, it's the relationship you have to those thoughts. So for instance, if you suddenly say, right, I've had a big weekend, I've drank so much, I don't want to do it again. But on Wednesday you go, maybe I could have a drink. Where's that thought come from? If your mind is sure, I don't want this, where has that thought come from? Can we stop that thought from coming? And the answer is yes, eventually in time, but we have to be able to relate to it in a different way whilst it's still coming. So if, let's say on Wednesday, that thought comes up, we need to have the awareness to recognize, oh, that thought is not what I want. That doesn't align with the person I want to be. How am I going to respond to that? Now, most people, and this is not just in habits or addiction, but this is worldwide, most people don't have a space between their thoughts and their actions. It's, this is what I'm thinking. I take it as truth. I'm going to act on this. But what meditation did, and we can call it what we want. Meditation has a lot of opinions about it. But let's call it being able to sit still and be aware and observe your mind. Suddenly you can create a distance between being reactive and being responsive. So it's almost like when I got to that point that I was so stressed, I got home and I was so embarrassed that I was about to try meditation. And I Googled it. I was like, what is meditation? How does it work? And they just said, sit on the floor, take deep breaths, just stay calm. Imagine your thoughts are like clouds and they keep passing. It's okay. Just watch the clouds. And I sat down. It was the first time in my adult life I'd not been distracted, that I'd actually sat and been like, let's see what happens. It was one of the most wildest experiences, which I could go into at depth. But the reality was, it was incredibly calming. And I came out of it and I forgot where I was for 15, 20 minutes. And I suddenly was like, okay, there's something in this. Like, if that's going to help me, then that's what I need to do, because that was more enjoyable than being on a 3-day bender and coming down at work on a 12-hour shift. So I thought, let me do that. And once I did it a couple of times, I then took on the persona that I was spiritual, I was a meditator, and I tell people like, oh, I meditate, yeah, I meditate. And they go, when was the last time you did it? I'm like, well, like 3 months ago. But I meditate. And suddenly there's a lot of other things that come with this. I started to become aware of what we call mental masturbation, telling people all these things I'm going to do, or these are the things. And as soon as people tell me like how impressed they are, I get that dopamine spike, and I'm like, well, I don't need to, my motivation to do that thing is now dropped off. And actually, I've got what I wanted, which was validation from the external. So then I found something else to work on, which is how do I change that so I don't actually need any validation from the outside? How do I get myself to a point where the only person I need to impress is me? And all of this came from just being able to have 15 minutes in the morning where I just shut out the noise and physically rewire my brain to a point where I'm the calmest I've ever been.
So this just reminded me of something, actually, a conversation I had a good friend with mine, Javi, this morning, and we're both very similar. So he gets up early than me. He gets up like 4:30, but I get up at 5. When I first woke up, I don't want to talk to anyone for an hour. I don't want anyone around me. I just want to be in my own thoughts and kind of clear my head.
Yeah.
And he said that he had, his girlfriend doesn't live with him, but when she's with him sometimes, she wants to like be with him in the morning, and he gets really irritable and kind of like pissed off because he needs to kind of have space to kind of let his thoughts process. I know quite a few men who are high performers who are like that. Why do you think that is? Because I know he also has a similar personality in terms of traits to me, where he's very driven, wants to kind of go all guns blazing.
It's a really interesting point because I'm exactly the same. Like, as soon as I wake up, I cannot be in a conversation. I cannot, most people, if you ask them how quick do you look at your phone when you wake up, it's like I haven't opened my eyes and I'm feeling around for the phone. And I've done that before. And that has happened sometimes frequently, sometimes infrequently over the past 7 years. And whenever it does, I now have the awareness to go, I feel a bit more irritable today. I feel a bit more anxious. And you're like, wow, it made me realize the first 30 minutes of your day dictates the rest of it. So, for instance, this morning, my alarm on my phone, because I just came from the UK, so I might sleep as just a couple of hours, but my alarm is very slow building jungle sounds. Like, it's the weirdest thing for people who are in the room who have not experienced it before, but it's like that idea of like the blazing alarm, like how you're going to have a good day after that is crazy. I rarely get woken up by alarm. Normally I wake up before my alarm anyway, which I did today. Then the alarm starts and it just gives me an idea. I know what time it is. As soon as I do, I turn it. I have to go across to the other side of the room. I don't keep my phone near me. I just go to the other side of the room, go back into bed. I sit up, and 15 minutes minimum. That's what I sit there and I breathe. I do some deep breathing. And for me, that is how I need to wake up in the morning. If I don't do that, and this can sometimes be a drawback because, for instance, I'm hypersensitive to caffeine, like next level. I never used to be. I used to smash double espressos at work. And since I've been so long being slowly over the years, improving the quality of how I look after myself, you become, which I think is an incredible thing. The human body is so good at recognizing what's happening. If I eat one thing that's slightly wrong, I'm like, oh, I can tell it's because of that. You become hyper aware. So caffeine, again, it's a stimulant. My body has had many stimulants over the years. It just cannot, like, anxious. I'm instantly anxious. I even had it last year where I was in Lisbon, and then I was in a supermarket and I saw some English breakfast tea. I've not had tea in years. And tea's got about half the caffeine of a coffee. I was like, yeah, let me have one of those. Made myself a cup of tea. I'm on a client call. I take a sip, one sip, and literally 2-3 minutes later, I was like, and I stopped the call and I'm like, I need to go. Something's not right. And I was like, what's happened? Like, why am I so? And I was like, it's the tea. And I had to lay down with like a black eye. And I'm like, I used to smash 12 grams of Coke. Like, how am I? It's a sip of tea. It was, yeah. And it made you realize that we just become more and more sensitive. And especially for people that are very mentally active, have a lot of thoughts going on, that morning is like, it's like starting the car and just slowly driving out of the drive. You don't start the car and instantly you're on the motorway going at 80 miles an hour. You need time to boot it up. And that's why that is so important. If ever you wake up and there's an alarm and there's like stress immediately, I always used to like the idea of like the SAS and the Special Forces. I was like obsessed. I always wanted to be in that. But then I watched like SAS Who Dares Wins. And when they're on that final challenge where they're just interrogated and not slept properly, I'd be like, guys, I need my 15-minute meditation and stretch and all these things. But the reality is I have a much better day if I start the day like that.
The big thing I see is that the most successful people have a very structured routine, in particular their start part of the day. So like, it's interesting you mentioned earlier about working out, sauna, ice bath, journaling. Because like that morning I saw, I think it was yesterday, I did all of those things.
Yeah.
And that for me is, there's a couple of reasons why I do that. So some hacks people. One of them does involve my phone, transparently. So I use AI to help me journal. So I'll literally just voice note ChatGPT. It has obviously loads of background information on me. Whatever I've done yesterday, I'm doing this podcast today, whatever it might be. Give me 5 questions I should answer today, and I'll sit down and write the questions out by hand, and then I'll write the reply out. And I find that helps me a lot to kind of process and think about what I'm going to do that day, or just life in general. And then I'll write 2 other things, which are like signal and noise, like the 3 main things I need to get that done that day, and there's the other crap. And it's almost like a load off of my mind. And then going to then work out clears my head straight away with any kind of mental baggage. And the reason I hate cold water, to be transparent, like hence why I live in Dubai, it's never cold. But according to my favorite white scientist, Dr. Andrew Huberman, you get more dopamine released from cold therapy than anything else without the crash.
Yeah.
So like you go in that, like if you kill yourself working out and then jump in the ice bath afterwards, that like dopamine rush afterwards, you feel in like cloud 10.
Yeah. And then any challenge that comes your way, you're like, we'll deal with it. It's fine. And I do the same thing, like, especially when I'm flying, I'll spend the entire flight journaling. I write everything about business, personal life. I just put everything out on paper. And I like the process of typing it, although I know the benefits of actually handwriting are greater, but I like typing it. And then what I do is I'll put it through ChatGPT. It knows everything about me. And a lot of people have different opinions on that, of like all this information you're giving away. And I'm like, the way it helps me to really recognize patterns in my behavior that I'm not even aware of. I think the biggest thing that helped me was realizing I don't know anything.
I'll give you a great prompt for anyone here. So when I do the journaling, one of the reasons why I also use AI for this, it gives me great questions. I'll write what I think the answers are, and then I'll then get it to give me the answers. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
And then, but it also will call me out my own bullshit. And this is interesting. I think that there was an interview with Sam Altman, who from OpenAI, and I think he said around like 85 to 90% of usage on ChatGPT is based around emotional work, stuff like that.
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because I've been in situations where I've felt like immense emotional pain, and I'll speak to friends, I can speak to therapists, and it helps. But for some reason, when I speak to AI, that feeling goes away. It's a really, really bizarre actually how effective it is to have someone who is just so non-stop supportive. But also, I always realize that it's designed to be your best friend.
Tell you what you want.
So I'm always like, do not be overly nice. Tell me exactly what I probably don't want to hear. I'm like, I need that. That's the stuff I need. And I think if you're someone that can get to a point where you're so open with hearing your flaws and embrace that, you're on a winning path.
You work with a lot of the demographic of clients who come to you. Would you say a lot of them are high achievers?
Yes, almost all.
Why do you think high achievers end up getting pulled into vices?
I think it's an attempt to quiet down the stress. And I think as well, high achievers, whether you drink or not, usually become quite successful on the outside. And with external success becomes usually self-employment, which means you have time freedom. It means you have financial freedom. It also means that you can get away with a lot. For instance, a lot of people I realize see self-employment as freedom, but a lot of people don't realize it can be a trap if you're a drinker and a drug user, because you are trapped without accountability. I've seen people who are like, I can't wait to work for myself. They quit their job, they go into self-employment, and they're like, I'm so used to having someone tell me what I do and structure, and then slowly you'd be like, well, listen, I can go in late on Monday because no one's going to tell me anything, or well, I'll tell you what, it's my business, so there's more money here, so I'm not limited by I've only got 20 quid in the account, I can't afford another bag. It's like, well, yeah, we'll just take it out of the business. And that's why I see a lot of business owners really go deep into it, because they have the capacity, they have the capabilities behind them that allow that. And if someone's either single or their partner doesn't know the full truth, one of the questions I always ask is, your partner, I get the partner's name, and I say, if your partner knew everything, like everything, every little thing you've done, every thought you've had, that would be 100%. What percent are we at? It's never over 70. Never over 70. Actually, very rarely you find a couple guys that are like 100%. And I'm like, you haven't done any bad things. You know? There's certain things which, yeah. But I think it's really clear to go, well, what if your partner did know all that? What would they do? They'd leave me. What happens then? Well, now I've got no accountability. So what happens then? Well, it gets worse. And you're like, so you're on the edge of things absolutely toppling here. And I think that's where we work in that point where it's like, we're not working with people that are doing it necessarily every day or absolute desperation, lost their jobs, lost their family. But unfortunately, we speak to people, I'll say why it's unfortunately, we speak to people before all that happens. And yet the fear of actually getting help is so complex in their minds that a lot of people say, I'm going to try and do this alone. And they reach out to us 6 months, 1 year in the future, and they have lost everything. And they always say the same thing, I wish I'd listened to you on that first call. And yet it's not driven by logic, because logic means you wouldn't even drink. If it was logic, none of this would be a situation. It's all purely emotion, and it's all based on fear. And the fear is, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I don't think it will work, I don't think I can do it. I also don't want to do it, as in I don't want to stop, because this is my comfort, this is my safe space, this is my crutch. And this whole world fascinates me. And a lot of what we do is all human psychology.
Do you think less people are doing drink and drugs now than they were 10 years ago, as a general?
As a global population, no. As a next generation, yes. Most people under 25, like it's the lowest amount of people, let's say per capita around the world that are drinking, right? I think we're fairly similar in ages, maybe.
35, haven't you?
Yeah, 35.
Yeah.
You look better than me.
We're both very young.
I got a lot of grey. I did a lot of drugs. But I think the global cocaine production is the highest it's ever been. And people around the world are paying crazy amounts for it. Like I was just in Australia earlier this year. People paying $300 for a gram. And you'd think that would slow people down. Everyone's paying it. A lot of people are doing it. But the one thing is, it used to be this really glamorous celebrity drug, or like, you know, you'd see it in movies and stuff. And now you see it in suburban homes where parents are doing it and their kids are playing in the next room. It is everywhere. We have calls every day from around the world. You know, we go Canada, and then Australia, and then Hong Kong, and then South America. We even had someone sign up from Ghana. I didn't even know they did coke in Ghana. But it's wild. It is everywhere. And it is, yeah, it's, I see it as the next pandemic.
One of the things I think, interestingly, filming this as we're in Dubai is, that's not as much of a problem here for obvious reasons. It's like the consequences of getting caught with that type of thing is very highly penalized, which in my opinion I'm happy with, because I'm not into that gig. One thing I do see is a big problem here, and it's quite funny when you see it out and about. And I saw a post on LinkedIn on this, and it really like made me laugh, and I'd never thought about it from that frame, but is one of the biggest downfall of men when they come to Dubai is exotic women, and like the escort scene, all that type of stuff. And I know some people have kind of been pulled down that rabbit hole. Is that something else you also see, and something you see as a growing problem?
It's so closely linked. And I think, you know, if anyone is watching this who has ever struggled with alcohol, and specifically coke, the sexual desires are heightened in a way that, you know, a lot of people will describe themselves as feral or just full-on weirdos after we've had a drink or a line. And that comes down to porn, it comes to prostitution. It is so prevalent, and yet that's probably the most shameful. So that's why we don't necessarily get people to talk about that first. But later down the line, for instance, I've worked with a lot of men, and we get the men together, and, you know, let's say we have a WhatsApp community. And one guy once reached out to me and said, I think I'm a bit different from the other guys. And I was like, how so? And he said, well, when I do it, I turn into a bit of a maniac sexually. And I was like, oh, no, you're in the right place. And he's like, no, Will, you don't get it. Like, I can't stop. And, you know, it's all dopamine chasing behaviors, right? Everything gets heightened. That's why gambling's such a big thing as well. But I'm like, oh no, I'll prove it to you. So I went into the men's chat we have, and I wrote my story. And I was like, here's what I used to do when I was doing it, and this is what I get involved in, blah, blah, blah. And every guy, one by one, oh yeah, same for me. Yeah, I was there, yeah. And that guy came to me and he's like, I thought I was the only one. I'm like, no, why do we think we're special? We are all so similar, and we're all dealing with the exact same substance, and we all relate to it in a very similar way. So of course that's going to happen. We drink, then we want a line, then we want to watch porn, or we want, to go and have sex, and then we'll gamble, and we'll sit like I know people, and I did this as well. You sit at your phone for hours, mindlessly gambling all of your money away. And then you wake up in the morning, you've got that pit in your stomach, like, what did I do? And this is the cycle. And yet 2 days later, you go, maybe I can have a drink. Maybe it'll be all right. And you're like, it's the same thing every time.
I just remembering, have you been to Vegas?
Yes.
Of course you've been to Vegas. Okay,
yes.
So,
yeah.
that was probably your thing back then. So I went to Vegas a month ago, not for those reasons, for like a business thing. And I was staying in the Venetian Hotel. And because of time difference, I was waking up really early. I remember walking down into the lobby and got on the elevator to get a coffee and then come back up at like 6 a.m. This dude gets in the lift with me and he's like, have you had a good night? I was like, I've literally just woken up. And then he was like, oh yeah, I went out drinking. I went to this club, and then I went to the strip club, and then I went gambling, and then went out drinking again. And I was like, fuck. It's like that whole cycle of going through all of those different like vices.
Yeah.
And it also being normal.
Yeah.
And happy to just tell a stranger like, yeah, this is just what I'm
Yeah. And I always find that an attempt at trying to remove any sort of guilt by being like, look how proud I am of this. Like, I used to really pride myself on how much drugs I could take. And, I always used to be like, I'll be the last man standing. I'll do more than you. I will destroy my mental health more than anybody else, is pretty much what I was trying to say. But it was the way of kind of saying, yeah, I'm proud of this. Because when I'm proud of it, there's no guilt. There's no regret in what I'm doing. And as soon as you get to that point where you're like, I'm not actually proud of this, that's when the whole deck of cards, that card house, just suddenly falls through, and you're like, I've been putting on a front and being so inauthentic for so many years. And that's usually the turning point.
I said something at our event, I think it was in March, and one of the most important things for people to do every day is not do anything they regret. And if you can kind of like live your life by that, absolutely smart, then everything becomes much easier, because if you're like, yeah, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do this, in the back of your head every time you do it, and you shouldn't, you're taking small little digs at kind of your self-esteem and your own confidence.
Exactly. And self-esteem is a big part of this. I once had a woman reach out. It was nothing to do with drink or drugs, but she said, I have a problem with binging Netflix. I binge Netflix for 9 hours a day. And of course, what we do with drink and drugs is applicable to all habits. Yeah. But of course, if I say I can help anyone with any habit, how do I find the right, like we focus on alcohol and drugs because it is the biggest problem we see at the moment, even though gambling, porn, it's all very close behind. But I remember saying to this woman, is like, you're doing it as like this voice in your head saying, I shouldn't be doing this. What if we change that? We don't try and change the habit. We change your perception of the habit and say, you should be doing that. Let's get a rota system out. We got a rota for the week, and we're like, so from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., you're going to be watching Netflix. That is your intention for the day. She's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, there's no guilt because that's what you're meant to be doing. And she's like, okay. And it got to 9 a.m. and I'm like, okay, you ready? Get started. And she started watching Netflix. 3 hours in, she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, exactly. Because the annoying voice in your head saying, I shouldn't be doing this, almost pushes you to keep doing it because you don't want to face the emotion of it. So you use whatever's giving you that escape even more. But if you remove that guilt and you go, actually, this is what I should be doing, it's easy. I feel very little guilt for anything I do. And I do things that maybe I would feel guilty about before because I do it with intention. And I think that's the big difference. If you're doing it like, I shouldn't be doing this, and you change to go, that's actually what I want to do. I'm doing this with intention. There's no guilt around it. Whole thing changes. It breaks all of that weight or power that habit had in your head.
Do you think it's, as human beings, we're designed to chase dopamine? Do you think that's a bad thing?
No, I think you don't think it's a bad thing either.
No, I'm a massive dopamine addict. I just have to find the right dopamine to chase.
Exactly. I think the problem is what type of dopamine you chase, because dopamine is the motivation, right? That's how we get motivated, and most people are motivated to, let's say, go get drugs. And I used to say to people, like, what if, when you've had a couple of drinks and that urge you have to get a bag of Coke, how powerful is that urge? You're willing to risk your job the next morning. You're willing to take the money out of the bank you don't have. You're willing to do all these things which defy any logic because you want that thing so much. What if you could feel that way about exercise? What if you could replace the desire for Coke with the desire for exercise? How do we do that? So the point where you're like, I don't care what it costs. If it costs me my job or costs me all the money I have, I've got to work out. What if you can change that in your head to get to that point? Because that's what I feel like I've got to now, where I probably exercise different to most people, and like a lot of, like, I'm not a fitness coach. I don't have the most in-depth knowledge about fitness coaching. I just love the pain. I love pushing myself in whatever way it is. I realize you're going to make me regret saying that if you take me rowing. But it's the idea that I love that idea of that feeling afterwards, because that dopamine I get after a workout. My number one for dopamine after a workout is Muay Thai, kickboxing. That's why I love spending a lot of time in Thailand, is because I've never felt anything quite like the high after a kickboxing session. Like, it is unreal. And like you say, you go into cold water after that. You go into the sunshine. I get my bare feet on the ground. I spend time around people I truly connect with and care about, where we're all authentic with each other. What I feel like I've done is I've taken a lot of things that were very like hippie and spiritual that people used to talk about and tried to find a logical, scientific backing behind it and just optimized. There's a big term like biohacking now, and everyone's trying to biohack in different ways. I've got barefoot shoes. I've got a Whoop like you. I've got a hydrogen water bottle in my bag. Like all these different things which are biohacking, but it doesn't matter unless you're doing the absolute basics. And it's the basics where we get our best dopamine, best quality of dopamine. It's where we feel our best, and the quality of your life is directly linked to the quality of your emotions. All of this is a non-negotiable. Having said that, I could keep going on for ages about this. Having said that, we were talking about the routine: sauna, cold plunge, workout. I've seen over the years, I remember when I did my first ice bath was like 7 years ago in Bali, and no one was doing it. There was one in this gym. One guy was sat in there for 15 minutes. I didn't know what it was. It looked like a fridge. Put my foot in. I was like, absolutely no way. I'm not doing that. I went home, and this voice in my head was like, you're going to go back tomorrow. You're going to do 10 seconds up to your neck. And I'm like, all right, we're going to do it. So next day I got there, tried to get down to my neck, couldn't do it. Got back out. I was like, absolutely, that is horrendous. I'm not doing that. Went home, and I'm like, I'm not happy with that. I need to do it. Again and again. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in there for 5 minutes, completely calm. I realized that with cold water, your body conditions quicker and quicker over the years, but the feeling I had after it was great. But then the feeling I had after exercise, and suddenly I had like a list of like 12 different practices. I'm like, where am I going to find time to do all these practices? And, you hear stories of especially a lot of guys in the US, like, yeah, my morning routine is like 4 or 5 hours long. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 4 or 5 hours doing a morning routine. So now what I do is I choose the ones that are the most important, and sporadically I'll throw another few in, but I don't feel guilty if I've not done them, which is what a lot of people do. Is like, I've not done this, I need to do this. And it's like, my top two are exercise and meditation. Those two make me feel better than anything else. So I don't have this long morning routine list, and I don't beat myself up. I'm human. When it suits and when I can, I do those things because it just makes me feel better.
I'm exactly the same. So for me, the biggest thing that will set me off in a bad mood is if I don't get up early, and if I get up late, and then I'm like anxious all day because I feel like I'm behind, and then I just feel off. My energy's off the whole day. So I'd rather get up earlier and be tired than sleep an extra 2 hours and then kind of be frustrated and also feel like I let myself down before the day's even kind of started.
Yeah.
So for me, that's probably like the first kind of like non-negotiable, and alongside then the working out, and then the other stuff, if I can do it, if it happens, then great. But if not, like, as long as I do those two things, then I'm kind of good.
How often do you wake up late?
Once every 2 weeks, maybe.
And what's usually the reason for it?
It's the week, okay, self-justification. It's a Sunday and I'm tired and I've trained loads, so like I'll get up at 6:30 instead of 5. That is, first of all, it's not that bad, but like that would probably be maybe once every 2 weeks.
And you've noticed that day you always feel a bit more.
I'll give you an example. Last Sunday, I think it happened. I was just in a bad mood, like for no real reason. I was in a bad mood, just wanted to work. And I think I wanted to work almost as a way to offset me for not getting up when I was supposed to, be like, you don't deserve to not work today, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When you sleep in later, I know I can see you've got a Whoop. Do you ever look at the sleep data for those days that you lie in?
My recovery's way better.
Yeah. So there is a positive to it.
My body needs more sleep than I probably give it,
yeah.
But it's give and take.
What time do you normally go to bed on a Saturday night?
So this is the problem. It's like sometimes slightly late, not massively late, but maybe like 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock.
Yeah, but it's later than normal.
Yeah, normally the week it'd be like 9 o'clock.
There was I don't know if you ever read the book, The 5 a.m. Club.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Was it the 5? No, there was two.
Robin Sharma?
Yeah, there was two. There was the 5 a.m. Club and another one, like Miracle Morning.
Okay,
that was it, Miracle Morning. Same premise. And one thing I remember, which was really interesting, was the only way you will ever be able to naturally wake up refreshed is going to bed early. There is no hack around this. We are the only species, there is no species on Earth that has out-evolved sleep. Sleep is one of my, I'm fascinated. That's why I got the Whoop as well. It's like, sleep is so the crucial element, especially with our clients as well, because two things that destroy sleep, alcohol and cocaine, you just don't get sleep. And I spent years of my life not sleeping. I used to stay awake for days and days and then go to work and then work for 12 hours and then go home and go, actually, let's get back on it and stay awake. And I deprived myself of so much sleep in my life. And now I love it, but I cannot sleep in because otherwise I'll be exactly the same. If I lie in, it's also why it's nice stopping in Dubai on the way to Asia, because if I'm jet lagged that way, you wake up at midday and you're like, instantly, it's almost like the same PTSD of that lifestyle. I'm like, oh my God. And yet the old version of me would be like, what are you talking about? You're not even hungover. And this is where a lot of people will always offer their opinions about, it's not that bad. And it's like, the reason why I'm 7 years out of drinking and drugs is because I did not take everyone's opinion with that much weight, because people tell you don't have a problem, it's okay. And you realize, if it's a problem to me, it's a problem. Waking up at 6:30 on a Sunday, for most people, is unheard of. They'd be like, I wish I could have that life. But for you, it's a problem. And that's exactly the point of, it's only a problem if you make it a problem. Waking up at 6:30 would feel like a problem to me. So you're not alone on that. And
I think a lot of high achievers, why that's also important is if you can have enough self-awareness to realize what is triggering you to feel a certain way, you can then almost play like a Sherlock Holmes and trace it back to be like, that is why.
Exactly.
And then you can correct the habits and the actions that are making you feel a certain way and stop you then feeling essentially shitty and actually improving the rest of your life.
And the word you use there, which we haven't said at all yet, which is so important, is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the most crucial aspect to breaking a habit, because if you don't know what's happening, you don't know what to solve. And for instance, there was a guy I remember a couple of years ago, and he slipped up. he went back to drinking close to 100 days. 100 days is a pretty big milestone for me. 7 days was a big milestone, but 100 days is like triple figures. It's a big one. As he was approaching 100 days, he went back to it. Now, there's also the factor that there's pressure building up. But he said there was nothing on that day that triggered him. There was nothing he could pinpoint. Because we always say, if you slip up when you join the program, it's good for us because we've got something to work with. If someone joins and never drinks again, me and my team are on edge. We don't know where the triggers are. But people do it. About 50% of people join and never touch it again. The other 50% will have slip ups, and we've got something to work with. And he was like, nothing happened on that day. I said, well, let's trace it back further. Remember 2 weeks ago when you were meant to go to that workout and you didn't go to it? Yeah. Okay. Then after that, you ate some takeaway food because you didn't want to cook. Yeah. Okay. And then that night you didn't sleep too well. Then this, and it's like, it's not just about what happens in the moment where you make that decision. It's everything that happened in the weeks leading up to that. One of the big things, which everyone will be able to relate to, is your phone. Source of the cheapest dopamine. And for me, the quickest way to remove joy from your life is spend a lot of time on your phone. Now, me and you are probably very, very similar. We make a lot of content. I spend a lot of time on my phone. I've got to be very, very aware of that and be active in removing it. Because every time you're on the phone, you do not have the awareness for your own emotions. And if someone spends a long time on their phone, they're giving themselves little dopamine hits. As we spoke about before, the little dopamine hits are no longer good enough. I need a bigger dopamine hit. Okay, well, I'm done on my phone. Let's get a takeaway. Let's get some ice cream. Let's get some sugar. Okay, and then maybe it's like, well, I need a bit more of a dopamine hit. Okay, let's watch some porn. And it keeps going up and up. And eventually, you'll get to a day where maybe you've had a bit of a bad day. You're a bit stressed. And you're like, do you know what? There's no amount of ice cream or porn that's going to solve this problem. I need a drink. And then you have a drink. And then once you've got that, the brain goes, well, I want a bit more. Let's get some Coke. And yeah, once that train leaves the station, there's no stopping it.
Have you ever had people come to, I'll give you a good example. So I, in transparency, take modafinil, which is like a brain focus drug, and it focuses. That will release tons of dopamine into your system. And I didn't realize not when I first think, but I took it maybe for like 3 weeks solid, like every day. wrecked my dopamine and serotonin because I couldn't naturally produce it and I felt like shit. And then I suddenly realized, okay, like this is why, and then found a way to kind of structure it so that didn't happen. Do you think people using substances like that can also lead to addiction? Because I also know in America, also full transparency, I have some, but I haven't taken it. It's like Adderall is a big thing, but it's also very addictive. Do you think that is also a big issue? Because knowing a lot of entrepreneurs, I know a lot of people who are wired to that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's another stimulant, right? It's exactly the same. And I've worked with people with pretty intense ADHD. And I remember the first guy I worked with who took modafinil, and the call the week before compared to the call I was on with him, it was two different people. When he was on modafinil, he was so calm and focused and just being present with me. And I realized that's what most of these guys, including myself, would be like on Coke, which is just channeled. What Coke does to someone with ADHD is shuts out all of the external noise and gives you one path of thinking. Now, when you have ADHD, again, I think it's a disclaimer to say I'm not an expert in ADHD. The only thing I'm an expert in is my own journey of drinking drugs and how to get out of it. And even our program, we are not medically trained. We just know how to give people the accountability, and we know what works based on thousands of people before. However, from my experience, you take Coke and it's almost like the release, like I can relax, which no one thinks of Coke as a relaxing thing. But those who struggle with it will feel that it is relaxing because it just calms everything else down. And that is a very, very dangerous thing to have something that will give you the desired outcome without you having to put any work into it. And this is also the same. I used to use this. I used to play rugby in the UK, and I had a very bad knee injury. And the first thing they told me to do was wear this knee brace. And I was like, okay, put the knee brace on. So good. So much more stability, so much like it was fine. But as I started to use it more and more, my leg got weaker and weaker and weaker. And I was like, the more I have this thing doing the work for me, the less I'm learning how to do the work. Same thing when we talk about drinking or drugs, is the idea that the more I use alcohol to socialize, the less I'm able to socialize without it. So my approach is always, we do not introduce anything that is external going in the body until we get the absolute base and we let our chemical brain hormones balance, right? Because if you've been having these large spikes of dopamine for so many years and you take it away, your body has to then adapt to, how do I produce this again myself? It takes time. That's why when people stop, they feel life is dull, life is boring. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to have fun. That's because your brain hasn't found that balance again. And it takes time. It can take weeks, it can take months, but eventually you find that level again. And then you start to see joy back in the world and you're like, oh, this is amazing. And once you get to that stage, you're like, why would I take something external when I can actually produce it internally now? And that's me as a case study. That's what happened to me. And I was like, the beauty of life and the world is incomparable now to what it was before. As in, it's so much better now that if you feel like this and alcohol and drugs make you feel like that, you're going to want to go there. But what if you can bring up your base level so you're above it, right? So actually now alcohol and Coke would make me feel worse. So there is zero desire. And because of that, I will never, ever go back to it.
It's funny you say that, because I used to drink a lot from 18 to 23, 24, whatever it was. And then I just stopped. And I've just basically stopped the last few, not even intentionally, just haven't. Because I had that conclusion that I drink this, I just feel worse. So I'm just not going to do this anymore. This is just shit.
Did you ever hear about the experiment they had with the rats and the Coke water?
No.
So they had, they gave a rat 2 bottles of water. One was just water and one was a solution of water mixed with cocaine. It was something like over 90% of the time, the rat will always choose the water with cocaine in it. And then someone came along and looked at this experiment and said, but the rat is in a cage. There is nothing else for the rat to do. So the rat is always going to want that dopamine. Why don't we put the rat in a different cage? And we're going to call this one Rat Park. And they put all these other rats in it. They put wheels, and it was like the most incredible space for rats where they just feel so fulfilled in every way. And in that cage, over 90% of the time, they just went for the water. And if you use that idea, it's actually the more fulfilling you feel or fulfilled you feel in your life, the less likely you want that thing. So I reckon there's probably a correlation between that point when you said, I don't want to do this anymore, to your actual life becoming a lot more fulfilling and enjoyable. And that's the shift that happens. So we always say our program is not to remove the substance. Our program is to create a life so fulfilling, the substance becomes irrelevant. It's not a battle. We don't put attention on it. We just create a better life.
And do you think a lot of that is just with intention of people understanding what they actually want and why?
Yeah. To bring it round to how we know each other, when I joined your program, one of the first questions was, you want to scale this, you want to grow the business. Why? And it was the first time I'd been asked that. And I remember it was really amazing for me to sit there and you said, without limits, go through that. What is it you want life to look like? And it was the first time I'd actually, not just been like, when people are like, I want to have that life, like specifically, where in the world, who with, what does your day look like? And I think that's a practice that most people don't do. They've never done before. And it's almost like that's how you reverse engineer it, right? You look at what the end result you want it to look like, and then you go, how do we get there? I mean, you just back the steps and you go, okay. And what I realized was that when I had that lifestyle I wanted to, I've got that. And it's an incredible thing to be able to say that. And I'm sure you might feel very similar. And I think a lot of people deserve to feel it.
You've worked with for quite a while now. What do you think has been the biggest change in your business? That was an interesting snippet to take out because it's those small things sometimes that certain people resonate with and it will just click. Was there anything else?
In terms of your program?
Yeah.
Oh, man, how long have we got? There were so many things. I think the biggest thing for me, and I've never had the opportunity to say this to you, but obviously you reached out to me on social media and you were one of the first people that did that. And I was naturally incredibly defensive. You reached out being like, how's the business going? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, like, who are you to ask? And I realized that was my ego coming out and being like, I don't want to, divulge all this information. I don't know who this person is. And then you were incredibly supportive, giving good advice, giving good value. I was like, yeah, no, it's actually really helpful. And things you told me helped. And then, I joined the program and I wouldn't be in this position now if it wasn't for you and your program. And I think that's the most powerful thing I can tell you today is, you completely changed the course of my life in terms of the business. In terms of the fulfillment of what we do, of course, it's very niche and there's not many people out there doing it. That is the area that I'm an expert in. When I started this, I didn't know about business. And your program and what you provide on that program transformed it. And my goal is not first and foremost to create the biggest business. It's to provide the most value to the most amount of people that I'm trying to help. But I cannot do that unless the business grows. And you unlocked those areas in my business to make sure that it could grow and continue to do so.
And that's why I'd frame that my favorite thing is helping the world's best kept secrets come out. Because if you're phenomenally good at what you do, but no one knows about you, who can you help?
The best known will always beat the best. And I think that's it. And I see that a lot where I see a lot of people really focusing in their businesses on trying to improve the quality of the value they're giving. But if no one's there to receive that value, what's the point? And in fact, I went a different route, which was before I joined the program, when I started, I didn't really know how I was going to make this work. I knew how to help someone out of it, but I didn't want to assume that I knew everything. So I would book 10 to 15 calls a day with nothing to offer. I just wanted to connect with people. I wanted to chat to people. I would speak to people in crack dens. I'd speak to CEOs. I'd speak to everybody. And we'd have like a really in-depth conversation. I'd find out so much about their life. And then they'd say, what's the solution? And I'd say, I don't know yet, but I'll let you know as soon as I do. And I just kept doing this again and again. And that's where things started to make sense. Like, okay, this is the reason why this is happening. And it was this giant social experiment I did to understand why people think certain ways, the fears people have, why people act certain ways, why they don't. And once I had all that, I was like, how do I deliver this? How do I show people this? How do I structure it? How do I structure the whole thing? One of the best ways to connect with people is free content, social media. How do I understand social media to get the message out there as far as possible and as impactful as possible? And yeah, you helped me do that.
And I think all credit to you because the amount of people you can now help is like massively increased. How many people do you think you've worked with in 2025 alone? What, we 9 months in?
We are 9 months in. It's interesting because there's a vast difference between the amount of people we help and the amount of people we unofficially help. because we're having close to 400 conversations a day with people who are struggling. A lot of people are so terrified of taking any form of action because they've been plied with so much shame. In terms of the program we run, it's hundreds of people that we've helped. But in terms of having conversations and actually giving our time to people, tens of thousands. And, you know, I'm still in this small little corner of the internet compared to what is actually out there, like how many people are struggling. And it is my moral duty to get out there to as many people as possible and to have the best systems, the best staff, the best product and service to make sure we help as many people as we can efficiently.
I think that's a good part to finish up on. Where's the best place to find out more about you, Will, and what you guys offer?
Let's say best place is Instagram at Teetotal Trainer or at Teetotal Trail, which is the name of the program. And we have an online, let's call it a rehabilitation program, but actually it's a wellness program to help people remove drugs and alcohol from their lives.
Make sure you check Will out. We'll drop all the details below in the show notes. I'm also, are you making long form content yet?
Started, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to push him into that because I know you, like from this conversation, there's so much value you can give on that,
yeah,
which I think will help loads and loads more people for free. If you guys enjoy the episode, make sure you follow Will. If you tag us on your short stories and tag me, I'll also repost it. If you check out the next episode on screen right now, and we'll see you next one coming up.